So I'm Jeremy. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Lighthouse Labs. CEO is a little bit of a tough title when you're running an education business. Try not to throw that out there too long. And I do a lot of talking, so Chief Talking Officer it is to most people. I've been running this since 2013. Started out here in Vancouver. We're in 6 cities across the country right now. And we train people to become professional web developers and mobile developers in a very short time and have a 96% placement of putting them into jobs. So we've been doing a lot of education and training, and people always ask me how we do that for people who have no coding experience. How do you get them to a point where not only are they able to learn something very complicated, but then they can go work in a job and actually excel and do well and get past some of that imposter syndrome stuff that a lot of people have and move beyond their confidence issues. So what I'm going to talk to you about tonight is humble confidence. I am an amazing, humble, confident person. No. So humble confidence is something that, as 2 words, seem like opposites. Obviously, something that a lot of people struggle with on one end or the other. At Lighthouse Labs, if you think about it, we have people who walk in the door who have never coded before. They're humble enough to know that they don't know very much, if anything at all, and confident enough to put down $9,000 to say, I think I can do this. Something that's pretty intimidating, something that's pretty stressful, and you have to have a lot of confidence in self to be able to do that. That's a really important skill. What we do is we take that skill of when they walk in the door and harness it in order to recreate that exact same concept over and over and over again until they realize that is actually the exact mentality they need for the rest of their career. This concept of, I am going to be solving problems that I don't know how to solve, and yet I need to be confident enough to handle solving those problems and figuring it out. So how do we deal with that? First of all, just as an understanding, this is a very slippery slope into one of these 2 things. Balance is everything here when you're talking about humble confidence. One side is imposter syndrome, the other is ego. I'm going to tell you a little about myself and where this came from, because my career is littered with moments of learning about why it sucks to either have imposter syndrome or why it sucks to have way too big an ego. I've been accused of both. First of all, imposter syndrome. When I started my first job ever, I was a mess. I had complete imposter syndrome. I asked tons of questions every time. I didn't believe in my own ability to solve any of the problems I needed to solve, and I just didn't think I belonged. And because of that, I had this little voice in my head constantly telling me not to let them know that you don't know anything and not to screw up. That is really hard to solve problems when there is something there messing with your head. How many people in the room have ever dealt with imposter syndrome, out of curiosity? Yeah, most of us. You know what that is, and you know how big a struggle that is. So when, I kind of sucked. I really sucked at my job, and my boss came up to me and he said, Jeremy, if you can't work a cash register at a bagel shop, you might as well quit life now. I was 15. It was hurtful. You can't ask a 22-year-old manager to think about someone's future career and think about how devastating quit life means, what it means to a 15-year-old, but it was. The next day, he was a little better. He said, I was thinking about firing you, and I wanted to tell you why. And he said, the reason is because it's not the mistakes you make, it's actually the fact that you don't have the confidence to even try and solve them yourself. That's telling me you're not learning anything, you're not trying to learn, you just keep looking for the answer and hoping nobody notices that you don't know what the hell you're doing. That was really important for me. As a person who had imposter syndrome, I all of a sudden understood that yes, making decisions, I could learn from decisions, you could learn from that failure, one way or the other, they'll leave you to do it as long as you figure it out, and you kind of have to have that confidence in yourself to figure it out. Fast forward to the job I had right before my starting of Lighthouse Labs. I'd been working at Sugar Media, a lot of Sugar Media on there, no Sugar Daddy, it was a marketing agency. Worked there, so I was about 3 years in, and to be honest, I'd built an ego, I was on a roll in my company. I felt really good, I'd nailed a few events, kind of built myself a little bit of a reputation really quickly. What I didn't know is how much luck I had done that with and a lot of hard work, but I'd gotten fluky with some great clients and put some things in place that I thought was my brain power of coming up with solutions that solved all the world's problems when it came to events. My boss saw my confidence, saw how well I'd done, put me on what was the most important potential account of our company's history. We were a $1.5 million company. It was a $2 million potential account. First, we had to run a pilot program for them, and in doing that, they would decide if we got the $2 million. It was for Labatt Blue. I walked into the room with a client, and I spent 2 hours arguing with them and telling them that I was the expert and they should listen to me. This is the guy who'd been in a company for 3 years in events out of university, and a guy who not that long ago was told he should quit life because he couldn't work a cashier machine in a bagel shop. My ego got the best of me, and by going through those problems, eventually, that account manager, who on the Labatt side, relented. Big mistake by him. I ran the event. It was terrible. He lost his job. We lost the account. Whole thing obviously did not reflect very well on me. Worse in that scenario was that after losing that account, my boss sat me down and said, "What did you learn? What did you come away with?" And I just blew away everything that I could have learned and just threw out excuses. Blamed other people, blamed other variables, this isn't my fault, yada, yada, yada. Luckily, I had a smart boss. He took me off my accounts. He didn't let me run another account for another year. He made sure that I learned the lessons that I needed to learn, and I walked away really understanding, yeah, I blew that whole thing. The difference between Labatt Blue and something in the product side and the CPG side from actually the same event was women's hair removal products, for what it's worth, Veet, in case you know it. Those two events were very different. The nuances of the brand were very important, and my ego got the best of me, and I didn't listen to what that brand manager was telling me was important for beer. Very, very different. I didn't have that. So my ego got in the way of any learnings that I could have taken away. So humble confidence. And that's how I built Lighthouse Labs. I went into a space that I knew nothing about. Code was completely foreign to me. I had 2 developers as co-founders. They took care of that side. My job was to figure out how to build an amazing education institution out of some of the stuff that they were doing, the kind of people that wanted it, the kind of employers that wanted it. How do you do something like this in 10 weeks? And the way I did it was through sheer ignorance and asking questions. I walked up to people. I told them I was an idiot. I said, what do I need to know? Tell me what I can get. I learned. I tried. I made decisions. I put things into play. As they were in play, I didn't worry about my failure, but I learned from all my failures. I kept paying attention. I was confident enough to make a lot of decisions, but I was humble enough to understand that most of those decisions could either be kind of right or wrong, or just right for that moment, but later on, I'd need to change them and adjust them, and that, honestly, I didn't know that much, but I knew that I had the ability to figure it out. That is how I've taught my staff. So one of the first things, and the reason I'm bringing this to most people here, is ultimately what we are excellent at is training talent. It's training people who have an ability to do great things, but get in their own way on a regular basis. For all of you who have staff or people that you are trying to train, this is one of the most important paradigms that you have to balance back and forth between. We teach our staff, they make decisions, but when they make decisions, the whole point of what we try to do is gather their insight. My job is to learn from my staff who are doing their job, and the first thing I want to know is how they learned. I want to understand their insight. So I want to know, were they humble enough to go around and figure things out properly, or did they just come with an opinion and say, yeah, I know what I'm doing, this is how to do it. The other side of that is, are they confident enough to make a decision that they know could be wrong? Really, really important. And for our students, when they're learning in our space, who are very much like our staff, it's the exact same paradigm. It's the idea that when they are trying to learn, they need to sit there, ask questions, figure things out, but when it's time to put some code down, don't be afraid. It's okay that you may feel like you don't know what you're doing. Just try it, do it, understand you're gonna fail and you're gonna keep learning from that. That has been how we've built a company that's gone to 6 different cities and run an education space that, in all honesty, scaling growth and quality of education are as opposite as humble confidence. Those are very, very different plays and very hard things to manage, and it's all about what you train people to pay attention to and how they go about gaining insight from everything they do. You don't want people who are scared, who are getting in their own way, and you need that confidence on the other side for them to actually make decisions and learn from that and believe in themselves as they do it. From my perspective, any of that, anything else that goes into finding staff and finding people, this is the #1 thing we look for, and it's why our grads have done so well as developers as they've gone into companies. People keep trying to explain it to us and tell us what has made a Lighthouse Labs grad work in their company. The biggest thing that they find is people who are constantly trying to learn, confident enough to do their work and not ask a question every second, but gain insight from what they learned and go back, learn again, put more into it. And that's a developer job, but that really does apply to everyone else. So one is willingness to learn is huge for humility, and it's huge for confidence. Okay? 2 is actually doing something with those learnings, putting them to action. Very important for confidence, but also being able to do that and know that you might fail is really crucial for someone's humility. 3rd is knowing that one way or the other, success or failure, it's really key that you are taking your learnings out of that and that you're comfortable with either or in order to make something better the next time you do it. Those are all keys to humble confidence. The only thing you don't want is the person that says, I'm the best and I'm the most humble. I suggest fire him, don't hire him, or maybe make him president. I'm not really sure. So thank you very much.
Any questions on this side of the room? This is getting awkward.
It's okay. It's all right.
Sorry, Jeremy.
I understand.
Anything over here? Oh, there we go.
Thank you
Brian
so
for the
much.
save.
We all have a bet over who has the most questions.
Oh,
Losing
really?
big time.
Here you go, Brian. Ask 7.
Yeah, I have 7 questions.
Perfect.
I actually was curious because you talk about taking your students and training them in such a way that they're able to go out and succeed, but you're dealing with variety of personalities that come in. How do you, I don't know, train them? Like, do you personalize the trainings for the personality, or is that, how is that? I'm just curious as to how you make that happen.
Totally.
Dealing
So
with the different personalities.
we have, I mean, first of all, we're an in-person space, and we have 7, for every 7 students, there's a mentor at all times. It's about 12 hours a day of learning for about 10 weeks. It's pretty intensive, and so our mentors get to know our students quite well. We also have a ton of data letting us know at all times live where students are at, where their completion percentage is at, what they understand. But ultimately, what we are trying to do is we find when people are getting too ahead of themselves and too confident is to produce more work for them and maybe more challenging work that really makes them step back and say, I've grown to a certain point, maybe I know this, but I just found out a whole bunch of stuff I don't know. On the other end, when people are really struggling and kind of it's overcoming them, which I'm sure a lot of people deal with, again, in their jobs, it's actually sitting them back and saying, listen, you paid us to come here saying you don't know anything. It's okay, you don't know anything. This is going to be your career. Take a breath. You can figure it out. Do you believe if you spent 50 hours working on this, you could solve the problem? The answer is yes. Good. Start your hours now. Don't start thinking about what you're not. Just start thinking about how to solve the problem. And I think between those 2 levels, that probably gives more of our solutions for each and every individual learner and student than anything else. I think coming back to the foundation for them is really crucial. That being said, our mentors are very much catering to any individual and how they react and how they respond, and we do deal with a lot of different learning styles.
Any question over here in the back? It's crazy seats. Ricky, Craig, Chris. I can't read it, but I'm going to say Akbar. I don't know. I saw AR. No, nothing over here. I'm just
Cool.
heckling. I don't know
appreciate
why.
it.
Oh, there's one over here. Oh, here, I'm going to...
Age limitation or something for the student that doesn't.
What's
Age
that?
limitations for students.
Age limitations. No, we have no age limitations. We take a lot of different people. The secret of success at Lighthouse Labs is really simple. It's very motivated people and motivated by the right things. So we're looking for people who want to become professional developers because ultimately to challenge yourself as intensely as they challenge themselves in the space, it has to be worth it, and they have to have their eyes on the prize in the long run. If you don't know what growth mindset is, this is essentially at the stem of growth mindset. It's this idea that as long as you work hard and you put your mind to it and you have some future vision of what you want to do, you can figure out just about anything. That's not an age problem. For us, that's never been a challenge. We've had people graduate at 60 and go get jobs as junior web developers. We've had people as young as 18 graduate.
Oh, there's a question over there.
Yes.
Sorry, we're just trying to get it
I'm
on
moving.
video. No, 1 second, please. Thank you. Thanks.
Assume I have a loud voice.
No, you do.
I do.
It's really loud.
So I'm just curious. Do you think the process of actually, going through it for 10 weeks makes someone humble? Because I can imagine like 7 hours a day. I'm just kind of working it out for 10 weeks. And do you think the kind of process of being humble is in that process of working, that long?
So yeah, I mean, what they're learning constantly is how little they know, and then every time they accomplish something, go, I can't believe I accomplished that. I guess there's more I can solve than I thought. The first 2 weeks are the hardest. That is a very, very humbling experience. People try to equate learning code to languages. I think the problem is when you learn hi and bonjour, you can treat it as the same word. When you're learning code, there's no comparison model for that word to another word. So it's an extremely humbling experience. Actually, I'd say most of our work in our 10 weeks is making sure to remind people of their different confidence levels, of why they should be confident, of how much they've learned in how short a time, and that their job is not to become amazing developers in 10 weeks. Their job is to become employable, good developers, where their journey is really a 1 to 2 year journey at a minimum, where they should be practicing all the time. Coding is hours. You put it in, you'll get to the other end. But the first thing you have to do is kind of erase the overconfidence and erase the imposter syndrome. And those are the two things that really get in the way of good learners.
Yeah, and do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them motivated through that process? Is it because the
So our
prize and then
pedagogy, basically a lot of our learning are small milestones. And there's small milestones that actually take in some of the other lessons when they're not even thinking about it, so that by the time they get some of their bigger projects, they've actually been doing a lot of little things that have been reinforcing stuff that they think they don't even understand. But then they get to a bigger project, they do something A to Z, finish it up, get to demo it, and all of a sudden in week 4, they're kind of sitting there going, oh my God, I just made a whole website, and one that's actually dynamic and responsive and moves and changes. And right then and there is when you kill them again. Right then and there is when you turn right back around and you say, okay, here's a whole other set of languages and frameworks, and all the things you learned don't really correspond here. So while you thought, good, I can create something, now you realize that was just something that you could create and you haven't quite figured it all out, and welcome to your career arc.
Oh, one more. This is nonstop. This is going to be the last one.
Should have made this the talk.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, so I just had a question. So with the rise of popularity in these boot camps, I know there's a few other ones around the city as well. Are you concerned about oversaturation at all, and what sets you apart from the rest of them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I get asked that quite a lot. So it's been about 4 years and a bit now since we've started, and there has been a growth in boot camps. What's really nice is I was just at Later. If you don't know them, cool startup, started out of a hackathon. Now they're, I think, about 32 people over in Gastown. They've hired 2 of our grads, or 3 of our grads now over time. The grad they hired 2 years ago is an intermediate level developer there. Our developers aren't stopping at junior, and most boot camps shouldn't if they're doing the right job there. So they're really moving them ahead. And so the saturation of the market, people keep coming and kind of saying, do you think it's happening? Our grads haven't slowed down in terms of getting jobs. We haven't seen any sign of companies not coming to us and looking for them. And actually, we keep getting repeat hires from our companies, which is a real big indication for us that things are working well. At some point, will there be a saturation? I have to imagine there will be. As education institutions that are responding to a demand, what we really have to figure out is who we are as institutions beyond one product market fit, which is the boot camp. So what our differentiator, I think, really is acknowledging that what we do extremely well is we build education that helps industry adapt by having the talent to help and support them. That's what we do extremely well. And so when we're looking at what we do next, it is about programs that are helping people do that. It's also actually going further in where developers are able to continue to adapt themselves. So we're really big believers in lifelong learners. Our differentiator, probably more than anything, is how much we work with developers to continue to grow and adjust to the fact that there is an ever-changing technology landscape, and they're going to have to keep adjusting. And that's been a really valuable part of how we've grown with our alumni network.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was the last question. If you've got a question, he'll be around after.